In tonight's episode of First Issues, we delve into the world of statistics. The importance of this field has risen dramatically over the years. Numbers and statistics are key components of everything from news reports, sports averages, astronomy, weather, elections, business reports, science, banking, and most importantly, economic conditions. A book titled Poor Numbers: How We Are Misled by African Development Statistics and What to Do About It was published last year, asserting that GDP figures, among other statistics, provided on the continent were inaccurate and not to be believed. The book's author has come under great criticism by a notable number of African statisticians, questioning its motives, timing, and scholastic credibility. And there have even been boycotts of author Professor Morgan Jervin's presentations on the subject. Some say the work comes on the heels of questions from the West as to whether Africa is really rising, and say it is an example of Afro-statistical pessimism. Zambian officials went as far as to put out a statement that said it is clear from the asymmetrical information that he had collected that Mr. Jervin had some hidden agenda, which left them to conclude that he was probably a hired gun meant to discredit African national accountants and eventually create more work and room for European-based technical assistance missions. We had the privilege of speaking to the professor during his recent trip to the country to square off bravely, I might add, against his biggest detractors at the 9th Africa Symposium on Statistical Development. Jervin says he has succeeded in drawing attention to the need for financial assistance for statistical development on the continent with the likes of philanthropic giant Bill Gates. A speaker at the symposium said, however, that pitiable is not the right approach to gain support, and that objective does not have to be insulting. Both Jervin and South African Statistician General and Chair of the Symposium, Balile Hohla, had salient points on the matter, and we leave the final judgment on the matter to you, the viewer at home. Going into our discussion, we just had to find out first, what is it about the book Poor Numbers that has stirred up so much controversy?
The book raised a number of, or maybe touched a raw nerve on the continent, particularly because of what we considered as poor scholarship that was in it, and omission of a whole chapter in what Africa is doing. And there are three sources of opinion: fact, rumor, and prejudice. And the problem with the book is that it lacked fundamentally the first shaper of opinion, which is fact, and it lacked balance in many respects, both in terms of its title, Poor Numbers: How We Are Deceived by or Misled by African Development Statisticians. And indeed, that comes as an affront in terms of what it portrays. And given that it didn't do justice in terms of intellectual and academic standards, it offended. But it attracted a lot of attention at the time when everybody is saying Africa is rising, but there is the book that saying we are misled. So the question was, what is the agenda of this book? Does it, in one way or the other, undermining and creating a perspective of Afro-pessimism? And that's what I think was the main problem with it. But to the credit of Jervin, I think he raised the necessary debates around numbers. I mean, what the book has said is that Africa's numbers probably are the worst, and you could see the evidence suggests differently, that we have frameworks that we comply with in the world. In fact, the story and the narrative of Africa, it's an Africa that is actually becoming a giant in obliging to the prerequisites of statecraft, which is providing statistics that are not influenced politically, that have integrity, that actually are used for development.
I thought my book, as most academic books, would have the destiny of being read by 100, 150 people perhaps, and then destined to live the rest of its life quietly on a library shelf. That has not been the case. I think that for many reasons we care a lot about statistics. Statistics is very important, and I think that the way it has been presented in this book and the way it is now matters for debates on economic development in Africa, on other issues, it really has become a hotly debated topic. Also with the new emphasis in the Millennium Development Goals discussions on calling for a data revolution. So what used to be boring statistics is not so boring statistics anymore. And I think also the debate also shows that this is not just a technocratic search for facts. There's a lot of interest, there's a lot of ownership, and there is a lot of politics at play as well when we enter this particular domain.
Why do you think it pushed so many buttons? What about poor numbers?
To some extent it is, and I've tried to explain this in the book as well, why hasn't this been said before? Because that's maybe one of the startling things, is that you go around, you talk to a statistician, talk to a consultant, a country representative, someone who's worked in aid, someone who works in an investment bank, who depends on getting data from time to time, members of parliament, NGOs, think tanks. They will all readily tell you that, these statistics are not always as trustable as they seem to be. So they are not facts, they are sometimes guesses, sometimes they're reasonable guesses, and other times they're not so very good guesses. And so I think that what made the book such a hot potato in a sense is that it was the first effort of systematically putting all this kind of impressionistic observations about the state of data together and putting it in a short and readable form. And it's always been a kind of I think a potential topic that will have to be important at some point. Now that I come along and written this book, it is on the agenda, and it's on the agenda to stay.
What does Mr. Lehotlo think could be the possible negative outcomes for the continent as a result of this work?
The world moves because there are economic developments and economic investments and negotiations, allocations, discussions. All those are underpinned by numbers. And when you say these numbers cannot be trusted, you are undermining the systems that determine this set of transactions or this set of relationships. So the consequences then undermine the credibility of the ability and the ability of the Africans to put their case amongst themselves and in between Africa and the rest of the world. The evidence, however, pointed out that the GDP, the revisions, are part and parcel of what we follow as a system of national accounts. He is correct in saying in some of the countries, the revisions are taking too long. The time lag, the period is 5-7 years, that's too long. Indeed, it's too long, we agree. But there were gross generalizations here, and they are created because he didn't look for the place where he lost the coin. He actually said, well, there is where there is light, but he was very selective in his, yes, I mean, that's a serious problem.
Well, I would contest the omission. I will seriously contest the omission. If you read the book and you read the sources of it, you'll find that I let senior statisticians and some pioneering statisticians such as Okigbo of Nigeria talk, Abuyande of Nigeria talk. I use their words to tell the story. When I tell about how national income has been measured in Botswana, I tell it through the words and notes taken by statisticians working in Botswana, in Gaborone. That's been my sources, and that's the fundamental backbone of this book. When I spoke to statisticians, I always wanted and always inquired and wanted to make inquiry at the highest level. Very seldomly, for different reasons, highest level had time to speak to me. Very often I was sent to the, if you are interested in national accounts, then talk to national accounts and so forth. And so as far as possible, I consulted senior management. I've consulted as well senior management in central banks and so forth like that to get, I've been trying to consult with whoever is been available.
What are the facts contrary to what Mr. Jervin has put forward?
The facts are Africa uses international standards. In fact, one of the major operation of the world, which is a global statistical operation, the International Comparisons Program, out of the 54 countries, or the 53 countries before South Sudan became the 54th, 50 countries on the continent are participating in that global operation. And when you test the validity of the information that we'll be releasing shortly in March, Africa actually has had the highest level of participation. In terms of the standards that have to be met, Africa has met those standards that are needed. In relation to censuses, Africa has risen to the platform in making sure that all the countries actually count. In relation to household surveys, Africa used to be the lead, in fact, at the time, so we are reclaiming that space. If you look at agricultural census now, Africa actually as a region in committing to actually producing agricultural statistics is leading. On the informal sector, we are doing quite a lot. It's a very complex economy to count, but even there, Africa is doing quite a lot in terms of measuring and creating instruments for measuring the informal sector. So the facts around what Africa is doing about its numbers are not the facts that, or are not the opinions that Professor Morton, Professor Jervin expresses in his book. But let me say again, to his credit, the book has raised the necessary debate, and do I subscribe to Machiavellian ways of raising the necessary debates? I'm not sure. Do I subscribe to saying the end justifies the means? I'm not sure, but at least what is being done is what we needed to do a long time ago as Africans, to write our narrative. And we should write our narrative. And if Jervin has to be credited, having been criticized by ourselves, I think he has to be credited for raising the bar for the need for Africans to write their narrative. In as far as that is concerned, I think his book has achieved a lot.
We live in an increasingly complex world due to the globalization trends we have seen in this century. Financial institutions, especially those operating on a global scale, have to continuously guard both themselves and their customers against incidents of identity theft, financial fraud, money laundering, and even terrorist financing. Issues of compliance with anti-money laundering, KYC, sanctions, and regulatory requirements are said to have dominated the financial services landscape in 2013 and look set to continue into 2014. Very early in the year, the world watched as JP Morgan, the largest bank in the United States, was fined $1.7 billion for apparently turning a blind eye to the Ponzi scheme ran by Bernard Madoff for more than 2 decades, allowing Bernie to launder billions of dollars in Ponzi proceeds. But Know Your Customer, or KYC procedures, are also said to exist to enable banks to know or understand their customers and their financial dealings better. The reasoning is that the better your bank understands your dealings, the less inconveniences and security clearances you'll be subjected to when conducting your day-to-day business. What are we, the consumers at the receiving end of these measures, really to expect? How are they to affect our dealings or relationship with our respective banks? We intend to address these questions over the next few weeks as we familiarize ourselves with KYC procedures. We first asked Lesego Tupayagale, a professional in enterprise and risk management, when consumers should expect to undergo the KYC process.
Know Your Customer, or KYC, is the process of performing due diligence measures on prospective and current customers. It involves identifying who we're dealing with and verifying the information that is provided by the customer to the bank. By performing KYC, the bank is building a profile or a picture of the customer at a given point in time to protect the bank from being used for illegal transactions, and also in addition to protect the customer's account from being used for illegal activities. Customers should be KYC'd on onboarding as and when the accounts are opened, and on a continual basis as and when there is a change in the customer's profile. For example, if there's a change in status, a change in income, or a change in address. In order to make sure that the bank is assisting the correct person or account holder, customers have to identify themselves. In Botswana, the Omang is used as the identity document for citizens. For non-citizens, it is the passport. This process has to be performed each time a customer makes a transaction or request for service from the bank, regardless of the length of time they've been banking with the bank. In order to open a bank account, a customer should provide their valid Omang for citizens and passports for non-citizens, and a document proving their address. A minor has no legal standing to transact without the consent or approval of a parent or a guardian. In this regard, it can be argued such an account, though in the names of the minor, belongs to the parent or guardian. Therefore, risk associated with the minor account lies with the parent or guardian, as the parent or guardian is the source of funds and also exercises control on the account. The parent or guardian should be KYC'd. The account is in the name of the minor, but all details recorded are for the parent or the guardian. The existing KYC documents can be used to open the new account, that the proof of residence is not older than 3 months, or that the documents are still valid. For example, that there has been no change in address and that the Omang is current. The same applies to the existing customer who also would like to open additional accounts. In this instance, all that is happening is that the customer's account is being migrated. It is not a change in status, unless there has been a change in status with regards to the customer's information. For example, the customer has moved addresses or the customer status has changed in any other way. It is advisable to write your name as is written in your identity document. This is because this is a contractual issue. Thus, it's very important that the full names that are on the identity document are captured in the bank systems. To perform a verification on a business address, we can use on-site inspections. In addition, we can also use company documents verified by the company secretary, or we can also use any letter from the local authorities. For joint accounts, all the individuals who are signees on the account need to be KYC'd. All the directors of the joint account, if it's a business account, also need to be KYC'd. The impact of not updating your personal details could be that your transactions could be slower to process, because the bank would need to verify that indeed you, the account holder, are the one who has issued the instructions to the bank. In addition, it opens the windows for fraudsters to use your account for illegal activities. So it is very important for the customer to update their records with the bank.
In this week's leadership tidbit from international expert Renee Carriol, he says that in a changed world, there needs to be a redefinition of what talent is, most especially in Africa.
In the old world, and this is the bit that Africa's got to get through its head, Africa still thinks that talent means academic qualifications. It's a nonsense. You go to Ghana and you've got people at 40 still studying, getting their third degree and their second master's. What for? What for? Because the culture there demanded, from British colonial times, those who were educated became civil servants. God forgive me, you still see the Ghanaians with the side parting, carrying the briefcase, wearing a shirt and tie, and they're still studying. Come on, guys. Which makes them academics, risk-averse, cautious, no experience of life whatsoever. I'm from a business school. My faculty is the is MSc in management. But I'm telling you, give me someone who's hungry over someone with a PhD every day. Every day. Hunger is worth 1,000 times more to me than a lazy person with a degree.
It is now time for the stock market review, courtesy of the Botswana Stock Exchange.
A very good evening to you all. Let's have a look at last week's capital market statistics. We start with the domestic companies index, which was up 0.37% from the previous week. The foreign companies index was, however, stagnant for the week due to the minimal trade of shares on the foreign board. Total turnover for the week was 12.6 million pula, a daily average of 3.2 million pula, and the total number of shares traded was 1.1 million. For a year-to-date comparison, for 2014 this year, the DCI is down 0.82%, whereas last year, as we started the second quarter, the DCI was up 12.85%. The foreign companies index is, however, up 0.15%, whereas last year, at this point, it was down 0.95%. Total turnover for the year is 663.2 million pula, which is almost 3 times what it was last year at this point, which was 265.1 million pula. And the total number of shares traded for the year, 167.7 million shares, whilst last year at this point, the number of shares traded was 105.3 million. If you look at our exchange traded funds, the Beta Beta ETF was stagnant for the week and it closed at 39 pula 15 thebe, whilst the New Gold ETF declined 2 pula 90 to end the week at 108 pula 90 thebe. That was your stock market roundup. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.
We thank you for tuning in to tonight's program. If you would like a recap, go on to our Facebook, YouTube or Twitter page. From me, Nameto Sibina, the team behind First Issues, and our sponsors First National Bank, we wish you a good night and pleasant viewing.